Good morning, beautifuls. We're going to do immersion dyeing today. We're not doing tie dyeing. Tie dyeing is when you have different shades of multiple colors or different shades of one color. We're going to do an even color dye of our fabric, of our material. Okay, so let's get started. Let's start by putting on our gloves because we want to dye the natural fabric. We don't want to dye the natural skin, okay? uh, I also got a plastic garbage bag that I'm going to line just a little bit my tabletop with to protect any splashes that may happen, but we're not going to go for splashes. We're going to be as neat as we can, but we just have this as backup, okay? Now, the goal is this is a fascinator that I started, and I wanted to use a wide band underneath it to support it. But that looks like an eyesore if someone's wearing it, right? The headband would stand out and not the actual hat. I'm not done with this hat. We will get into this hat and finish its design in another video. But today we're just going to dye our natural fabric of Sinamay to match the top of the fascinator that I'm working on. I could not find this color, even though there's several greens going to hit through here. My goal is to do the darker green color of the Sinamay. If it comes out lighter, like the lighter green, I won't be upset with that, but my goal is to go for the darker green within this really nice fabric, okay? So this is the dye that we're using. It's called Procyon MX dye. It's for natural fibers, linen, cotton, rayon, and I didn't know rayon was a natural fiber. Did you guys? In this case, we're going to be using straw. This is a natural plant-based fiber, so this qualifies, okay? So I already filled up. You need warm water. A bucket is preferred. And I chose this bucket because there's actually measurements on the inside of this bucket. It's a standard cleaning bucket for if you were mopping the floor or anything. I cleaned it very well, and on the side they have quart and gallon measurements. So I filled this up to 1 gallon of water, warm water, because it's going to help all of our mixtures dissolve easily when the water's warm in opposed to cold. So what I'm going to do is I am going to measure 1 tablespoon of this Procyon, I hope I'm describing it right, MX dye. And I have a bowl over here. Move this to the side that I'm going to be measuring everything over. Okay, so we have 1 tablespoon. Add a little bit more. Putting it in my water. Ooh. Now, you know what? When I got the green, and it says forest green, and when I purchased this material, this said hunter green. So I was like, what green? They didn't have a hunter green. So I looked up, I Googled what green is closest to hunter green. And they said forest green. And then when you put it side by side, right, you're like, it doesn't look like it's going to be the right green. But as soon as I put it in the water, guys, let's take a look at this. It turned dark green. Do you see that? That is very dark green. So we're just going to slowly mix this until it dissolves, because there are some pieces of the powder that you'll be able to see floating. We just want to make sure there's no floating pieces in here. Okay. So again, we're doing immersion dyeing, which means we're going to fully immerse our material into the mixture here. Okay. So I'm just making sure everything has dissolved. And this only is recommended not only for natural fibers, but for light colored or natural colored fibers. So this is, a natural colored fiber. It's not dyed, but you could use white. You could use a natural dye. I would say maybe even a pale yellow, but anything dark, brown, black, any of the other colors, red, blue, not recommended. You want to start off with a blank canvas as though you're an artist painting, right? You always need a blank canvas. So now we're just going to slowly immerse this. Wow. This looks great, guys. Okay. And what we're going to do is, I'm going to show you more up close. Okay. Now, they say it's very important to have room. So you don't want to get a bucket that's too small and you can't move your material around. And because this is warm water, it's also bending our material a little bit, because Sinamay is very moldable. Okay, so we're stirring this. And it says to stir slowly for 15 minutes. So what I'm going to do, so I don't lose track. Okay, so I set a timer on my additional cell phone for 15 minutes. It goes by pretty quickly, actually. And we are ready to go to the next step. The only 3 products you need is your dye for natural fibers, your salt, and some soda ash. Now, I noticed when reading this, underneath it says cool water dye for natural fibers. And I was like, it says everything to mix in with warm water. Why does it say cool water dye? When I looked it up, they basically said that this dye, powdered dye, was made with cool water, but that doesn't apply to our instructions. We mix warm water to help these 3 ingredients dissolve better in warm water. Okay, just side point because I was curious. So now that our Sinamay material headbands, wide headbands, are in here, and you can see that they've dyed thus far. Looking at our material behind it, it's still quite pale, right? They say if you add less water, of course, you get more dye, but For the measurements, I believe I added the right amount of measurements. It definitely looks different than when I first put it in. And guess what? If it's even after all these steps, if it's not dark enough, I can do the steps all over again, okay? To add more. So now what we're gonna do is we're going to remove our headbands temporarily while we add the soda ash to the water. So I have 1 cup of warm water, and we're going to add 1 tablespoon of soda ash. And I will say, soda ash, when I looked it up, why soda ash? And I was like, do they mean baking soda? Because I had never heard of soda ash. I'm grabbing a different mixer to just dissolve it here. And basically, soda ash just um, helps the dye to fully penetrate your fabric. Okay, because this is something that we want the dye to, permeate our product, our material, and so I guess it helps to make it more porous, if you will. Okay, so now that it's dissolved, we're going to slowly add it into our mixture without the fabric being in the bucket. Okay, I already removed it. And now we're going to put our headbands back in. And it says with the soda ash, we need to stir it for an additional 40 minutes. All right, and we'll be back. We'll set our timer on our cell phone and we'll be back in 40 minutes. So we're back for our next step. Step 1 was adding our dye into warm water and then immersing our Sinamay headbands, fascinators, into the water, stirring it for 15 minutes, and then we removed it. Step 2 was adding soda ash to the warm water mixture and then re-immersing our Sinamay headbands into the warm water. And that was really so that the color could penetrate even further into the fabric. So after 40 minutes of that, of the soda ash wash, or I should say bath, really, look at it, guys. And look at it compared to the gold behind us. Doesn't it almost look like a perfect match there? Ah, but I do want it to be just a little bit deeper. You know why? Because this is wet. And when dye dries, it dries lighter than when you see it wet. So, and plus, we have another step. Our last step is really, or our next to last step is rinsing it several times and washing it. So, I want to make sure it doesn't lighten when I rinse it several times and when I wash it a couple of times. So, I'm going to go for a little bit more depth. And this step, the third step, is optional, which is adding dissolved salt in warm water and immersing it into our mixture of dye and soda ash, because the salt, it darkens the dye and it's supposed to take it to a darker color. Okay, all right, so we're going to just remove our fascinator headbands once again. And move slowly. You don't want to splatter this all around. Okay, I have wood floors, I have light color carpets. I do not all of a sudden want it to be green. Okay, so I have a cup of warm water, and now we're going to add 1 tablespoon has been working for me thus far. We're going to add 1 tablespoon of salt to the warm water. And we add it to warm water because we want it to dissolve. Okay. So we're just going to mix it up there. Let all those salt beads dissolve to a light, cloudy mixture. I'm curious to see how much darker it's going to make it. So I'm slowly adding it to our mixture. And we're just going to mix it here. Now we're going to re-immerse our Sinamay Fascinators. And this sits for another 40 minutes. And they want you to stir it slowly for 40 minutes so that it takes the color evenly. Okay, so we're going to come back in 40 minutes and see how that works for us. We're back. All right, so we're down to our last step. There's really only 3 basic steps. That's immersing our fabric into the natural dye. Then there's adding the soda ash. And then there's rinsing and washing your material as the final step. The step that we did that was optional, only if you want to see a deeper color to your fabric, is adding salt to the overall mixture. That is completely optional, but there's really only 3 basic steps. I feel like I'm doing this. I'm gonna do Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so are you with me? It's really simple. And on the back of the die, they have a website where you can go and get the step-by-step instructions as well. Is really what I did because this is the first time that I have done an immersion dye bath for my fabric, and I'm thrilled and I'm hooked. And now every time I can't find the color I want, guess what? We are going to dye our fabric. Overall, I would say it takes about, I would say a good 2 to 3 hours. Okay, with the slowly mixing it in 15 minutes, and then with the soda ash for another 40 minutes, and then you have to add another 40 minutes if now you're going to add in the salt. Okay, so now that we have added in the salt to make the fabric a little deeper, because I know I'm going to wash it and rinse it, I wanted to go a little deeper with the fabric, okay, so that it wears well. Let's take a look, shall we? Okay, I hope we're down far enough. There we go. Okay, so now I'm just gonna lift. Look at how deep it is, guys. This was my goal. Now this is the original fabric, and this is what it's gonna sit on. And this is before I've rinsed it and washed it. I'm pretty happy with it. I really am. It's a nice match. And you know, you don't need swatches. I know, you know, you may look up dyes and they may have several greens or several blues. You know, I would say if you know the shade that you're working with, just Google what shade is close to it, or they do have a contact number and an email. I'm sure someone can help you get to, the right dye. Um, yeah, so don't sweat it. It'll be fine. And remember too, you don't always have to have the exact dye, because you can add more water to make it lighter to dilute it, or you can add less water to make it deeper. And of course, adding your salt will also make it deeper. So you can also play with your shades as you go. As it starts to dye, you can kind of stop it where you like, and you can control your mixture to make it at depth, or not at depth. So now I'm just going to put these in my sink, and we're going to start the rinsing and washing process. I'll move this out the way. And they say to rinse with cool water, and that totally makes sense. You know why? Because warm water opens up your product to accept the material. Cold water hardens the material and traps in the color, okay? So make sure you use cold water when rinsing. And I took out my stopper because I didn't want to have to go through and then clean the sink stopper from the dye. I know it's a natural dye, but yeah. After all of that time, look guys, there's just a little mark that's a little light on both sides. It was fully immersed, but overall I'm still very happy with it overall. To be honest with you, I might just take a green permanent ink marker and just get that dot. I wouldn't redo all of this again just for that one dot. So we're rinsing just until the water is clear. And as you can see, the water is clear. It's no longer green. Now on the instructions, they say to use Synthropol. I was like, what is Synthropol? When I looked up Synthropol substitutes, they said basically use a mild soap, mild detergent. So I looked for woolite, didn't have woolite because that's also for natural fabrics. So the next best thing for anything natural is hand soap, liquid hand soap. So we're just going to put this on. And this is an important step because you don't want any of this dye to run on the clients or on yourself. If you're making this for yourself, you don't want to have to deal with runny fabric later. You really want to wash it and make sure you don't have those issues. I'm just using my gloves and hands to give it a nice little mild bath. Yeah. Now we're doing this one. I'm interested to see how much water, how much color will come out in the water from doing this bath. On the instructions, they said rinse 2 and 3 times, but you know what? The instructions were for if you do a t-shirt. This is not a t-shirt, so I can already tell we won't need to do it that many repetitions, because even my suds for this is white. It's not green, so that lets me know that the product really, and this is a product that is perforated, it has holes, right? It's weaved, it's wefted, so yeah. So now I'm going to rinse with cool water again. And as I'm rinsing it, the water, as you can see, is pretty clear. There's no green water even when rinsing it. So this rinsing twice and you know, giving it a scrub down once is going to be enough for this fabric. That's good news, right? Yeah. And they both look the same color, you know what I mean? One doesn't look darker than the other, but on both, they just have this one spot that did not take the color. And it's on all sections. It's interesting because I didn't even notice that, but for it soaking as long as it did twice, I'm shocked. But guess what? It's not going to ruin our party. No, ma'am. And if I wanted, I haven't tossed the water yet, I can easily just re-dip that. You know, I could. Yeah. Now I'm just going to lay on my plastic bag and let it dry. And I am completely happy with the process. I really am, for it being my first time. I know it won't be my last. And this is why, for my millionaires and hat designers, hat makers, hat crafters, this is why, you know, we should be charging for our time, whatever value you put on that time, because as you can see, we're no different than any other designer, clothing designer, painter, sculptor. We put 110% in our craft, right? Because we love what we do, and we'll do whatever we have to do to get the look, to get what it is that we're trying to achieve. And you know, if you're not a hat designer or a milliner, that's okay. But you know, I'm glad that you are here to witness the process of the work that goes behind hat making and what we will do to get the desired result. So now I'm putting it up against the hat. Look at that match. The person who wears this hat will probably never know all the work and time that went into this, but it's okay. They're going to be happy. They're going to feel good. It's the compliments that is the payment, and the appreciation of what we do is the payment for sure. So, all right, guys, I will share the final photo after this video once it dries. And watch out for the next video. I'm going to put it all together, and we're going to have a wonderful fascinator. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next week.